Well, hello everybody. I'm going to pause from my videos critiquing, leftists or socialists or whatever you want to call them, or leftist libertarians, if in the case of Sam Cedar or something like that, to address this point for you. Again, I'm an ANCAP, if you don't know. But I figure in this talk, I will address the fears of the coronavirus, the crashing of the stock market, and the history that led up to it. Now, this will be brief, but I do think it's an important conversation. Now, if you are of the opinion that this virus scare is all overblown and stuff, well, you're right. And if you're of the opinion that it's not overblown, then you're a dunce. The fact is that, this coronavirus stuff, it is overblown. Majorly overblown. Most of the deaths are from people that are in their 70s or older. And I'd probably venture to say that at least half of them are probably above 80. Though I don't have official statistics on that. But guys, as far as humans' age go, or as far as a human age goes, that's pretty old. And often, these people already have health problems that they're dealing with. Maybe they have pneumonia, or they have some kind of respiratory and tract infections, or something like that. It becomes overwhelming for them. That's just a fact of life. That's not to make light of it. If we can stop it, I hope we do stop it. But it's more so to say that for the people that are working, you, me, for our children even, this is not a virus to worry about. It's like a flu, and in the United States, we're pretty good at fighting it off, staving off flu. But I wanted to make a note on that because it's just not even warranting of how fearful people are. I mean, closing down businesses because of flu going around, or something like the flu going around, for something that has a less of a kill rate, or at least about the same kill rate as the flu, for anybody younger than 70 years old, that doesn't really add up. I want to give you a different theory. This is a theory that I think is the explanation for why there's such a fear. It has nothing to do with some kind of grand plan of, say, Satan or the New World Order or the Illuminati or whatever it is, or any conspiracy that you might find. It has nothing to do with that. The only conspiracy involved would be the Federal Reserve. Now, and don't get me wrong, I think that the World Health Organization, I think the IMF, I think those are just fraud organizations that are just out there to take people's money and eventually try to become their government. The World Bank as well. I think that those organizations are just bad organizations. But as far as this crisis goes, let's look at some facts. In January, there was a record number of CEOs. Not just there's more businesses than ever kind of record number CEOs. There was a record scale as a percentage of total CEOs. There was a record number that have left their organizations, that have stepped down, that have resigned, including Bob Iger from Disney. And you got Bill Gates, who stepped away from the board. It is not to go, hunker down in New Zealand in their bunkers until the end of the world or anything like that. It's not to do with that. It's because they knew that this crash was coming. The question is, how'd they know? They knew this crash was coming, and they didn't want their reigns or their image tarnished by the fallout. Did you know that in something like December? Did you know that there was a health panel, a World Health Organization panel, I believe it was, in New York to discuss pandemic outbreak. Did you know that? It, curiously enough, it was a new strain of coronavirus that they were addressing. Yeah, this is true stuff. You can find the YouTube videos of that panel interview or that panel discussion. It's very formal. It's definitely not some kind of makeshift aluminum hat kind of stuff. So curiously enough, they were doing this. Now, what was the purpose of that? Is it because there was a virus that was going around? I would say no. Not because there's no virus. I'm not saying that there's no virus. I'm saying that this was all a big distraction for you. So what was the distraction? The distraction was that this March, the crash was coming. Sometime between March and June, that this stock market crash was going to come. But how did they know? That is again the question. How did they know that this crash was coming? Well, to understand why crashes were coming, you have to go back to 2008, and you need to go back to listening to some of the Austrian economists, and including Peter Schiff, who I don't think considers himself an Austrian, but he was calling it. Now, I'm not a huge Peter Schiff fan, but he was calling the crash, and he told you exactly what was going to happen. We're going to go back to 0% interest rates, and he nailed it. We did. What ended up happening is, in 2008, they bought us some time by increasing the Fed's balance sheet and pumping liquidity into the market. Because without liquidity, stock prices plunge. Not only stock prices, but gold prices plunge. All prices plunge. All asset classes plunge. That's what happens in a liquidity crisis, is that the supply and the demand, there's very little demand all of a sudden. And because there's so little demand, prices go down to a place that sellers just don't want to take a loss for, so they don't sell. So you just have this standstill. You have this stalemate in the market, and that's what happened. We had a liquidity crisis, and that's exactly what happened in this crash too. Is there was a liquidity crisis. All of a sudden, people didn't have the money to buy. So they knew that this crash was imminent in 2020. They knew that. So they started doing these things like this, how can we keep the public distracted? And the reason they want to, I'll get to later. But they wanted to keep the public distracted, or I should say, the way that they decided to keep the public distracted was they wanted to blame it on a virus. They wanted to blame it on something that people would believe. That people believe is worth their time to worry about. Why not a virus? It spreads, you can't see it. So why not a virus? It's also, I do have my issues with the medical industry in that if there's a new hip diagnosis, it tends to, kind of gain popularity within diagnoses all of a sudden. Like, the first kid diagnosed with ADD, all of a sudden, a lot of kids are diagnosed with ADD. So, it's just one of those things that, I think doctors want to be hip on that kind of stuff. Autoimmunes didn't exist 50 years ago. That kind of stuff. So, this is not to say that I'm a denier of these things. I'm not denying these things. I'm saying that there's a contagion effect within the doctor diagnosis, which is ironic. So in 2008, when the stock market crashed, the Fed pumped the market full of liquidity by buying bonds, buying treasury bonds, and increasing their balance sheet. And they also lowered interest rates to make lending a lot easier. That way they can do this money creation with, fractional reserve banking. People will want to take more loans out, and so they can they take the loans out, they deposit it in their local institution. That local institution can then use fractional reserve banking to increase the dollars in the system. So they increase money that way. And it was full. But what ends up happening is when you lower interest rates, you got to understand what's actually happening in real terms. In real terms, a lower interest rate means a project, like say a project at a company, or even a whole company, as it is, the project becomes artificially more profitable. That is, when we're not looking at true interest rates, we are willing to take on a greater or a riskier project than we should. Because a lower interest rate will allow us to boost the net present value of that project, possibly making it what would be a negative project, making it a positive one by using the same cash flows, but at a 10% interest rate, because that might be what the market interest rate should be. It's negative, but when you lower interest rates to 6%, where they can guarantee lending at 6%, well then, that project can go above zero, and then one of your first lessons in finance class is you take projects that are greater than zero. So when you spread that out across millions of people, and you also lower credit standards and stuff like that too to get credit. Again, this whole goal is to increase liquidity. You spread that out over millions of people. Well, the inevitable result is people go into businesses that they shouldn't have gone into in the first place, because those businesses look like they would be profitable at lower interest rates. But the problem is markets want market interest rates. They want natural interest rates, is what I would call them, as natural. Market determined rates. So what ends up happening is these projects start to go underwater. And it might take years before you start realizing this, before you start realizing it is not the most profitable project at the moment. But they start losing investors. They start losing capital inflows. Excuse me, I had to yawn. They start losing capital inflows. And when they start losing these capital inflows, well, people start want to start pulling their money out. And that requires more insertion of liquidity. So notice that what ended up happening, though, was the market did want to return to natural interest rates. So the Fed thought it would be a wise idea, starting back at the beginning of Trump's presidency, the Fed thought it would be a wise idea to start raising interest rates. And don't get me wrong, I think that the Fed not touching interest rates and letting them be whatever they are, that's the wisest idea possible. But they thought it would be a wise idea because they thought, the economies are roaring. Why not? But the problem is, when you raise interest rates, the economy wants to recess. That's because certain projects start going marginal on the margin. Those projects on the margin that have a positive net present value, they start going underwater, and they have to collapse. And you're talking thousands of jobs, if not tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of jobs, ultimately, in a economy that has 300 million people in it. So they start raising rates, and then those businesses start collapsing. That is the beginning of a recession. And no politician who's only there for 4 years is going to allow you to have a recession or to cause a recession. So Trump starts calling out, you need to lower interest rates, you need to lower interest rates. I'm not blaming this on Trump. I'm not blaming it on any particular president. I do blame it on Ben Bernanke and Janet Yellen and Jay Powell. Well, this one will be blamed on Jay Powell. And also Greenspan. He also catches a slap in this too. But those projects on the margin, every time you raise rates, those projects on the margin can't compete anymore. And as a consequence, they go underwater. And that's just cause for a recession. And they were able to do this, and they were able to suffer some of that in the meantime. And so they were able to raise up the rates somewhat. But notice, though, that as time went on, the last interest rate they had was what, March of last year, March of 2018, I believe? Something like that. Then it's been a while since they've had or 2019 maybe. But it's been a while since they've raised rates, and they knew that they would have to pause, and they had announced no more rate increases this year, because they saw that these companies are underwater. They can't make ends meet. It was only a matter of time till they grind to a halt. And it also makes sense that the higher up you go, the more businesses get impacted at a time. I would think that makes somewhat decent sense. And so they had to stop. But what ended up happening, though, is that a lot of businesses started forecasting, in 2020 we're going to have a rough year. The easy money's gone. So these CEOs that had all these projects in their companies as well, they knew it. They knew this was coming too. So come January, they planned their exits with their golden parachutes and all that kind of stuff. They planned their exit. They're not going to be the ones to be reigning over at the end of their careers. They're not going to be the ones reigning over a depression economy. They don't want to have that reputation, so they left. That's what ended up happening. They exited. But the federal government also knew, or at least the Federal Reserve also knew, that this was going to happen. So, this is, you gotta consider, these people are all part of the same groups. The World Health Organization, the IMF, the UN, the World Bank. They're all part of the same organizations. So they decided, we need a distraction, because we've tanked the economy. Because they didn't suffer how they should have in 2008. They didn't let the economy suffer like it should have in 2008. They just merely pushed it off a decade. And then this week has been what the consequences are of that. And there's no reason to believe it's just a coincidence that in December they run through a panel discussion on this new virus that is spreading like a pandemic. There's no reason. Instead, what ended up happening is they crafted an idea to not get blamed. The Federal Reserve and the World Bank or whatever, and the European Central Bank, all these central banks in the world, they crafted a plan to not get blamed for the global depression. And that's what you're seeing now. You're seeing this plan in action. Yeah, there's a virus, because there's a virus every winter. That's understandable. Every winter through spring, there's a virus. Notice that this one is late, by the way. This is a pretty late virus in all things considered. Most viruses start up, probably around November or something like that in the Northern Hemisphere. It's pretty late. But it's because they knew that this collapse was coming soon. It was going to come quick. It's going to happen sometime between March and June if they're lucky. So they have this virus called coronavirus, and these panels in December of 2019 to discuss how they would handle it, their disaster response. And I will tell you, here's what I think it was. It was for people who discover it. It was so that way you go, oh yeah, look at them, they're handling it and stuff. They were forecasting it. But for the people that were there, or that are part of the health organization and stuff like that, to them they're none the wiser. They're not looking at the economic. They're not questioning this panel plus the CEO exit plus the stock market crash. They're not questioning any of that. They're not considering. Oh yeah, also in September of 2018. Or 2019, by the way, this is what tipped off everybody that this was coming soon. September 2019, the repo market spiked all of a sudden because of a lack of liquidity. Nobody's putting these pieces together going, especially in the health organizations, they're not putting these pieces together going, perhaps what we're seeing here is a distraction. Instead, they look at it and they go, oh yeah, they've taught us how to respond to this thing. and so they're just going along with the plan. This is how disaster recovery works, or this is how pandemic protection works. Because we got a plan in place now. Thank those elites for having this all planned out for us. No. Instead, it was an information campaign. When people see news about the coronavirus, they don't think economic crisis anymore. They think, oh, a pandemic. And then they can blame the shutting down of businesses, which is also another thing. Like that's an overblown scenario or an overblown reaction to this disease. The disease has at most, for like people that are 40 years old, has at most like a 0.5% death rate. But that rate might be 0.1%, which is on par with the flu. That's the most recent stats I've looked at. That's for a 40-year-old something person. It's better for people that are younger than that. So what you're seeing here is not some grand plan to steal your rights and stuff. Yeah, the government's overreacting too, and we shouldn't be allowing this either. People like Gavin Newsom, I think is his name, Gavin Newsom out in California and stuff. Yeah, they're overreacting, and those are bastards that shouldn't even hold office. And this quarantine thing is bogus. But what you're really seeing is you're seeing people who are so idiotic that they think that they can play with the economy and not face any consequences. That they think that they can play with the economy and not face any consequences. And, not face any consequences for their actions. Or that the economy won't suffer. That the economy won't collapse, every so many years. And worse, I think that this might be the end of the U.S. dollar. This crisis or the next one. The next one will certainly be the end of the U.S. dollar. You can mark my words on that one. But that's the mindset of these people. Is that they don't realize that they can't play with market prices. Market prices always come roaring back. These ideas of market failure that people are talking about, no. These are markets that are trying to destroy coercive action. That's what a market failure is. It's weeding out coerciveness. Unsustainable coerciveness. So next time you hear about this coronavirus, just keep thinking about it. Think about those. I think there's like 4 points right there. There's the repo market spiked in September. In December, they hold a pandemic awareness or alert program or whatever it's called. In January, the CEOs exit, and in March, the economy collapses. Keep all that in mind. And then look at the death rates. By the way, if you notice that the death rate on this thing, despite the reaction of the people, it's the death rate on this thing is significantly low enough that it doesn't really draw a whole lot of attention as far as how is it that 10% of people are dying, and I have 100 people that I know, and I don't know one of them that's dead. Notice that. It's not, what'd you say? It's not it's kind of a strange, reality, especially when you're talking about people that are forecasting 150 million people dying or something like that, some kind of nonsense number. Anyway, it's just food for thought. I think that I do think that what you're seeing is a planned economic restructuring. They know these companies have to go bankrupt. They know that these companies are going to go bankrupt no matter what. No matter what they set the market rate to, because the government is running out of options. Or not the government, I don't want to say the government. The Federal Reserve is running out of options. And they slash interest rates to 0% immediately, instead of just letting it, bringing it down slowly and stuff. They do it immediately. These are all unprecedented steps. How fast they did it, how fast they dropped it, that is unprecedented. How fast they started stimulating the economy, that's unprecedented. These are all evidences that what you're seeing is an economic restructuring. And what I mean by restructuring is I don't mean it's planned. I don't mean the actual restructuring of his plan, that there's certain businesses that they're favoring and stuff like that. What I'm saying is, they know that there's going to be massive unemployment. And they need to get ready for that. They know that there's going to be massive unemployment. But they can't do anything about it. And what they're trying to do is get you to not be pissed off at these delusions of grandeur, or these men with delusions of grandeur. But they're trying to keep you from getting pissed off at them so that they actually have a job whenever it's all done. When what you should be doing at the end of this crisis, or as soon as the quarantine's up and stuff, you should be demanding that they all get fired and that the Fed gets abolished. Oh. That's what you should be demanding. Anyway, guys, that's just some food for thought on on the reality of this coronavirus. I hope it's been a good lesson. I hope if you have questions, please let me know. Maybe something I haven't thought about. But I'm telling you, if you start putting pieces together, they seem like they fit pretty squarely. Anyway, alright, take it easy. If you liked it, please like the video. If you didn't like it, please let me know why in the comments. If you have questions, please let me know in the comments. I'll be glad to answer them. Alright, take care.